So people assume that because you've had a baby, your vagina is stretched open and loose. There's a lot of conversation about loose vaginas. Your vagina can't be loose. Let's talk about tissue in the body is never loose.
Like your vagina cannot be loose.
It cannot ever be loose. It might feel stretched out to you, and the sensation might be that. But if like things were loose in your body, your eyeballs would fall out of your head. It's like physiologically not possible for tissue to be loose in your body, and yet we hear this all the time about our vagina.
Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're gonna dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Hello, welcome to Plenty. Today, I have an incredible guest for you. Her name is Lauren Ohayon, and she is the founder of Restore Your Core, which aims to help women have a sustainable fitness and movement practice that helps them be strong, long, and functional for their entire lives. Her approach to mobility, movement, strength, and common pelvic floor issues like diastasis recti and back problems and pelvic floor instability is absolutely revolutionary. I cannot wait for you to dive in to this episode. Enjoy. Lauren, thank you for being here.
Hi.
Again, I just want to say publicly the generosity of spirit. When you came the first time, that footage was corrupted. I don't know what happened. And so you were generous again to come here. And I really appreciate you. And I just want to say that.
Thank you. I love talking to you.
We're going to have so much fun a second time and go even deeper because we're super warmed up. We are lubed up. We are hot and ready. So I want to ask you, number one, when we have pelvic floor issues, backing up, first of all, what are the things that are really common health issues that people don't realize are actually connected to pelvic floor dysfunction? Or maybe you would say dysfunction in a different way, but
yeah, no, that's okay. We can go with patterning.
Patterning. Thank you.
Yeah, low back pain, hip pain. Both of those are very commonly associated. Yeah, low back pain and hip pain. And with males who have like pelvic floor dysfunction, they almost always have those as well. So that's interesting. Hip pain, low back pain.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course there's patterning in the feet that are commonly correlated with pelvic floor stuff like excessive foot pronation or excessive foot supination, and we will see transfer up the chain, but we don't make like causative, we don't make comments of like, if you have flat feet, you will have pelvic floor dysfunction, but we do see those relationships all the time.
It's all related.
It is all connected indeed. Like a spider web, you pull on one end, the other end gets tensioned as well.
Why would the way our foot responds to the floor or interacts with the floor when we walk have anything to do with our pelvic floor?
Because when your foot rolls in like a foot pronation, it creates what's called internal. So then your leg bone, your shin bone internally rotates, generally speaking, unless there's a torsion. And then your thigh bone will internally rotate. And when your thigh bone internally rotates, it has an effect on your pelvis, and all your pelvic floor muscles are right there, including some of them that attach to the hip.
Okay, so we have hip pain, low back pain. What else could be related to pelvic floor patterning that we're sort of like looking in all the wrong places for solutions?
Like upper body patterning. So people who are very gymnast or the arch back, the sway back. Or people who are very hunched over. So that because think of your pelvic floor and core as a canister, like a liquid-filled canister. And when the bottom, which is the pelvic floor, is overpressurized we can get the patterning, the dysfunctions and disorders and imbalances. And what will disrupt that kind of integrity of that liquid-filled canister is too much pressure. And so if you're hunched over, just even do it in your own body, you pull everything in, it pushes everything down. It's like you're always in a bear down. You're always bearing down.
Yeah.
And so anything you do with your legs and your upper body can affect the pelvic floor. I mean, the pelvic floor is right there, the conduit. It is the conduit, it is the center, it is the transmitter, it is the shock absorbing location. I mean, it is literally just taking it all in and on. But because we live in a culture that doesn't like to discuss the pelvic floor unless we're discussing like urination or defecation, then nobody really pays attention to it as a vital location of inception, conception, reception. Like it's all of it.
Inception,
Conception, reception, deception.
Deception.
I mean, it is literally just all of it.
So putting our energy and attention there, we would be well served physically and potentially
For sure.
in other areas of our life as well. I went to pelvic PT after both of my births. I'm so grateful I did because they attached these biofeedback sensors to me internally and helped me to really begin to map how my patterning was impacting my bowels, my vaginal opening, pain, restoration, all of it.
Yeah.
And I found out that that's not normal in the United States to
Pelvic
go
floor PT,
to
yeah,
pelvic floor
for sure.
PT and like even do any kind of,
Correct.
and so what's told to women after we give birth is you need to strengthen your pelvic floor and do kegels.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It's not true,
Okay.
but it's not entirely true. That's like saying, oh, your shoulder hurts. How about some bicep curls? I mean, Kegels is one form of contraction for the pelvic floor, and it's not always called for because unfortunately, a ton of people, even if they've given birth, their pelvic floor is actually operating at too high tone. We live in a society that creates too high tone in the pelvic floor because we live in a society that we live in a world that creates too high pressure in the core and pelvic floor. So when there's all this pressure in the core and pelvic floor, the pelvic floor is highly intelligent. It feels this pressure and it reacts by tensing up. If you put a bag on your shoulder and you walk around with a handbag, your shoulder will tense up in response because people think it like drops it down. It actually tenses up.
Yeah, my right shoulder is higher from wearing a purse there.
Correct.
For many years and also holding a baby on that hip.
And the body is so intelligent. So if you're constantly bearing down, so right now, imagine you're pressing a baby out of your vagina, or if you don't have a vagina, you can also imagine you're pressing a baby because males have basically an identical pelvic floor to females. I like to tell all my male clients, like, within your penis is a vagina. So yeah, their pelvic floor is identical.
Cool.
I know the male in the room is crossing his legs. He's like, I do not have a vagina in my penis. But the truth is the pelvic floor musculature is this very similar. And so if you imagine you have something there, like a grapefruit or a baby, and you want to push it out, just go ahead and push down. That's bearing down. Yeah. Now, if you were bearing down all the time, because of how you sit, stand, breathe, hold your body, tension patterns, then your body is smart and it's not going to allow you to constantly bear down. And it's going to be like, wait, Kate, hold on. Let's tighten that up. Yeah. Then we get tighter and tighter and tighter. So people assume that because you've had a baby, your vagina is stretched open and loose. There's a lot of conversation about loose vaginas. Your vagina can't be loose. Let's talk about tissue in the body is never loose. Like
your vagina cannot be loose.
It cannot ever be loose. It might feel stretched out to you, and the sensation might be that. But if like things were loose in your body, your eyeballs would fall out of your head. It's like physiologically not possible for tissue to be loose in your body, and yet we hear this all the time about our vagina, that it's loose. And people will come to me and describe their vagina as loose because they've been described too as loose. And even people in the very woo-woo holistic space utilizing jade eggs will come to me with terminology that is very, very not factual and information that is really based on, I don't know what they're reading. And I'm like, well, I hear you. I don't dislike your relationship with your jade egg. I'd love to reframe the tissue that you're utilizing it with. It is not loose tissue. Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes, though, there's a sensation
For sure.
of it being stretched
Yes.
out? And if so, what's happening in there?
First of all, sensation is subjective, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody can do something that is like another person would perceive to be incredibly painful and full of discomfort, like a tattoo. And they're loving the moment. And the other person is like, get me off this table.
Totally.
Yeah. So when somebody feels something, we can't take that for truth or gospel. We can just take that for experience. Oh, your experience of your body is. And yes, if you've given vaginal birth, the tissues are indeed in a different like position and their tensile strength is different. It doesn't make them loose though. So having connective tissue that is under a different tensile load doesn't still make it loose. Mm-hmm. So yes, people can feel that way.
They can feel that way.
Yes.
But what's necessary is not necessarily kegels.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. We need to stop using this binary instruction, which is basically it's so simplistic, it's ridiculous, and foisting it on the pelvic floor. Just because you can stop your urine midstream doesn't mean that's how you strengthen the body part.
Right. Yeah. And what I was, through the biofeedback, through all the work that I did, I found after both births that actually my pelvic floor had maybe was just holding.
Yeah.
Was just holding.
Yes.
Perhaps it was freaked out. It had a lot of activity.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just
it
a lot
happens.
going on. And so I needed to actually learn how to release my pelvic floor, not strengthen. My pelvic floor was perfectly strong.
Correct.
I needed to learn to let go, which is, of
right.
course, a metaphor for
many things.
Many things.
Yes.
Many things.
Yeah, it's a great teacher. Listen, the pelvic floor is a great guide.
Yeah,
it's a
really
great medicine
is.
to like what else we can inform in our bodies.
Now, you mentioned before we started recording that ED, erectile dysfunction in men, can also be very related to pelvic floor because why?
Well, I'm not like
obviously
the expert
there's like
in
a
male.
lot
I love
big,
hanging out with females more, but because because the pelvic floor muscle, the pelvic floor is controlling the organs. Our organs are working in concert with our pelvic floor muscles. So when the pelvic, so for females, for example, females will have less pleasurable orgasms, or not be able to reach orgasm, or less sensation. Or, and they can be very aroused. Arousal is very, very different than like the orgasm, right? So a female can get very, very aroused and then not be able to have an orgasm to reach peak, to reach climax. So that is often very tight pelvic floor muscles, because in order to reach climax, your pelvic floor has to now, under tension, have all these tiny, tiny, tiny contractions. And all of that is bringing blood flow. Your clitoris, your vulva, everything's getting engorged with blood. All this blood is flowing in. How does blood flow in? The muscles need to be able to be available for that.
Relax and contract.
Yeah, and the muscles need to pull the blood in, and you get all these tiny contractions. If your pelvic floor is already in a held state, nothing's happening. So the blood is not flowing to those areas. Males are no different. They many males will ED is different for every male.
Yeah.
Some males ED can be pain post climax. Or it can be inability to stay hard. Yeah. Or it can be pain during erection. I mean, there's just so many things that can happen.
Right.
But again, like the muscles need to be able to go through, they need to muscle. Muscles need to muscle, right?
And that requires being able to let go as well as hold.
That requires a functional system.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If somebody holds a muscle too tight, right? Or they sit all day long and their hips are in this position, when they stand up, their hips are still in this position, because our bodies are intelligent and adaptive. They're going to hold your body in the position you do most with it. So when you sit all day long and your pelvis now stays in the sitting position, you also restrict blood flow to the area. And the pelvic floor is that area.
One thing I noticed when I came to your studio is you don't have a desk.
Yeah.
And you also told me that when your kids were younger and they had like less feelings about how things should be, you also didn't really have furniture.
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
Because I really believe it's good to move more. And I love the idea of moving more. So the more opportunity to get up and down off the floor, the better. We get very comfortable in our seats and couches. And it's not always advantageous for the body. Like sitting on a couch is, a lot of people get off a couch and they're like, ooh, ooh, and then they go right back into it. It's like, hi, did you notice how you felt when you get off the couch?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying everyone needs to sit like a monk all day long, rigid, but
You don't sit like that.
no, I
Right.
change positions as often. Like the next position is the best position.
Oh, I love that.
So I change
you're
positions
just
a lot.
in movement.
I'm in movement a lot.
You're not
Yeah.
stagnant.
Right. And when I have to work, I try to work standing at my counter and not
Like
sitting.
your kitchen counter?
Yeah, so I can stand.
Okay.
I haven't been industrious enough to set up a workstation upstairs where I can stand. So I'll go downstairs. I like
Great.
to change environments too.
Yeah. And your kitchen has great light. So it's perfect.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about
It's a
the light.
win-win.
Well, that's because I do a lot of work on Zoom. Obviously, I guess if I'm
Yes.
just like writing, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how the light is. So one of the things that you talk about is the mapping and the anatomy of the pelvic floor. Most women do not know what their anatomy is.
Yeah.
We don't even know what the parts are. We don't even know. So can you just kind of walk us through what is in our pelvic floor so we can visually
Yeah,
map it and
for
also
sure.
feel it right now while we're listening?
So it's interesting. I mean, I think that people like if I say leg swing, you know exactly. You don't need to do a leg swing to feel the leg swing. You know what I'm talking about. If I say arm swing, push off with your foot, kick a ball, right? So there's all these functions that our body can do that people allocate a feeling to. We have this 3-dimensional mind body understanding of that. The pelvic floor is a little different because it doesn't reach, grab, push, or pull. It does none of those things. It is more like a dome that it's like a jellyfish, and it can
Like your
it
diaphragm,
responds.
kind
Yes,
of?
it's a responsive. It's completely in mirror to the diaphragm. People want to exert force on it the way we exert force on like our arm, which is part of the problem. Which is where squeeze makes sense. Contract your pelvic floor, squeeze makes sense because we live in a society that likes to foist a immediate oh, you don't feel it, squeeze it. Okay, well maybe
That's a metaphor.
Yeah, maybe we don't feel it because it has a different feeling tone. You got to change the radio station and tune in to a little bit of a different radio station right now.
Yeah.
And so part of it is so I could tell you how to feel it. It would take me a little while. We don't have time. I'm actually teaching a webinar on it tomorrow. But basically, it's about you'll find on a lot of my socials, I talk a lot about being able to wag your clitoris or being able to wag your tailbone. So the tailbone is moving from the back, and your tailbone actually has the ability to wag, and it has all these muscles connected to it, and it has a joint in there. So just like if you've imagined a sailboat with all these, the mast connected, and the sails connected to the mast, your pelvic floor, your tailbone is like that mast with all these sails connected to it. And it's capable of moving and being moved. So sometimes you can feel your pelvic floor just by wagging your tailbone forward and backward. And it might create that squeeze, but you might also be able to tune into a different element of movement there. And for some people, it's almost like a parachute lifting and lowering. I don't like to foist. I don't like to define what you could, should, and would be feeling, but I will say, in my body, it can almost feel like that. Like you drop a scarf and it goes down and up, and then sometimes it has more intensity and less intensity, depending on, of course, the activity. And it can feel like a squeeze because we're so used to thinking about squeeze with the pelvic floor, but it's so much more 3-dimensional than squeeze. It's the entire bowl lowering and lifting with all of its myriad of attachments. So you can find that attachment through your tailbone. You can also find that attachment by nodding your clitoris. If you sat in front of your mirror with your legs open and no clothes on, and you looked at your clitoris, like a penis, can nod backward and forward, like a little button. It can go up and down.
That's amazing.
It's phenomenal.
Did it take you a while to figure out how to do that?
Well, I've been
that
playing with
doesn't
my
seem
clitoris
like-
for a really long time, and I don't
Okay.
mean sexually, but I do that too.
Yeah.
I really mean I love mapping my brain to
Yeah.
my body, and I
Yeah.
love feeling can I open and close my labia? Can I, I'm really into that.
Yeah.
What can I do with my anus? And again, people get so uncomfortable. They're like, oh my God, she's talking about sexual things. I'm like, oh my God, she's talking about organs and bodies and
Yeah.
tissue, and it's all alive and it's
our
all
anatomy.
contractile. And it's you want to make it sexual, you go right
No one
ahead.
would freak out if you were talking about a pinky finger.
Hello.
I mean, they might think you were weird by being fascinated by how it could move, but they wouldn't be like,
right.
ugh.
Well, we if you didn't have the use of your hands, you would not be a happy human.
Right.
And yet when we start talking about the pelvic floor, like this wondrous thing, people panic because they're like, you know, these days, and I think people paying attention to me these days are much more comfortable with it. So one of the ways to feel your pelvic floor is to embody all the kind of areas around it and mobilize those, even like doing work with like sliding your sitting bones back and forth. Like, and then again, you're tuning in less. You're starting to try to tune into a different feeling tone of what's happening within the bowl of your pelvis, because it won't swing, reach, grab, like it won't do those things. No, I'm sorry. I wish I could change anatomy for you to give you a different experience, but that's not life.
One of the most common things that comes up, of course, with women is like, oh, I can't jump on a trampoline. I can't go for a run because I spontaneously leak, right? And I just pee my pants. Is that a forever thing? Like if somebody is doing that, does that just mean that's how their body is forever? Or are there things that we can do? And is there a certain amount of time past giving birth that it's too late or not?
Well, so many people who've never given birth have this issue too.
Good to
know. And I think like we assume that it's a, you know, but I know a lot of teenagers with incontinence.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Unfortunately.
Because of the pelvic floor patterning?
Yeah. I mean, it's generally incontinence is, again, people think my pelvic floor is too weak or i.e. too loose, therefore I leak urine. It's actually usually your pelvic floor is so tight that function, again, of controlling urine is a little bit muffled and muted. It's not sharp. It's not a well-sharpened tool right now. It can absolutely change. I think the thing about it is like your investment, and I don't mean money, but like we are not taught to value, we're taught to fix broken things. So when you leak, you want to fix your problem. And people are like, well, people DM me every day. They're like, do you have an exercise for incontinence? I'm like, no, I have a protocol. Like, I have a system, but I don't have one exercise. And whoever does have that one exercise is also lying to you, by the way. Yeah. So it's like, incontinence is definitely something for most people that can be improved a lot, if not fully resolved. I've seen the spectrum. I've seen some people fully, and I've seen other people less resolve it. But yes, it is completely generally resolvable.
Yeah.
It just takes a commitment that most people are not willing to invest.
That investment. And you said you have a protocol. And so obviously you're not going to give that to us today because it's your entire program. But like,
you don't want me to either. I'm into How many hours do you have?
Exactly. But I am curious if you can paint us a picture of what some of the like core pillars are, or what the framework is. So we might imagine, do I want to make that investment?
Yeah. It all comes down to how do you do what you do when you do what you do. So when you go to open a door, your arm muscles work reflexively. You don't direct your fingers and your arms. They go. The core and pelvic floor is designed to be used reflexively as well. The core and pelvic floor is not designed to be utilized under instruction. However, somehow somebody thought it was a great idea to start instructing the core and pelvic floor on how to behave for activities. And we've overridden the body's natural ability to manage and disperse load. So, movement is shock absorption, propulsion, and load management. And the core and pelvic floor are the places where that happens. So what we look at is like, how are you, the first thing is like, how do you breathe? Most people are chronic belly breathers. And it doesn't help that systems like yoga tell people like the best breathing is the belly breathing. It's actually not. Like,
really?
It's not. Well,
tell me more.
Why don't you put your hands on where your diaphragm is? Yeah. Is that your belly?
No.
What part of your body is that?
My solar plexus.
Yeah. That's your rib cage.
Right.
Your diaphragm is in your rib cage. And in fact, it's so in your rib cage that your heart sits on your diaphragm. So put your hand on your heart. Now your diaphragm is right there. That is not your belly.
No.
Why are we telling people to belly breathe when the diaphragm is in the rib cage? So that makes no sense. And I think it has to do with the fact that probably people were terrified of like panic breathing, which happens up here
very
with
high
accessory muscle use.
Like collarbone.
So the antidote that people discovered for that was, oh, they're a belly breather. Oh, just sorry, they're a chest
yeah.
breather. Make them a belly breather. But belly breathing is not an appropriate antidote to chest breathing. If you're a chest breather, we need to work on that pattern, not send you down to your belly. Constant chronic belly, like do it. Take a big, do you want to sit on your perineum? Can you?
Yes.
Can you put your hand under your perineum?
Yeah.
Come on. Let's do this. Yeah, good. Okay. And then put your other hand on your belly. And then take a big, huge belly breath for me. And notice if you feel that you're bearing down.
I mean, it would create pressure.
Correct. Now put your hand on your ribs.
Yeah.
And go ahead, take a rib breath. Not a collarbone breath, but a rib breath. Does that feel different in your pelvic floor? And you can go back and forth a few times.
Yeah, let me just see.
And just map it. Kind of map what you feel when you big belly breathe. And when you belly breathe, don't move your ribs that much because most belly breathers are not moving their ribs.
I may be more of a rib breather. I'm probably patterned for that. But
do you feel the difference in your perineum?
I feel the difference of like you said, it's like the jellyfish. So I feel like more of a pressure down. I mean,
when you belly breathe.
When I belly breathe because I'm sending breath.
Well, you're sending movement down. Breath goes into the breath is going to stay in your bronchial tree no matter what you do. Air is going to stay there.
Air's not going into my mouth.
It's not. But that's
Thank
fine.
you for that clarification.
Yes. Well, I only clarify because I hear like yoga people say all sorts of things about like breathe into your baby toe, and I'm like, you can't do that.
Why is my belly going out
because it's
when
expanding.
I'm breathing into my belly?
Squeeze the top of a balloon.
Yeah.
It's just doing that. It's just it's actually not expanding. It's increasing in volume.
Because the air couldn't possibly leave my lungs.
The air is definitely
so then why is my belly going
the air
out?
You would have a collapsed lung if air was leaving your lung. That would be an ER situation because it's movement. Air and breath are two different things. Air is what you pull into your body. Breath is what you do with that air. Breath is shape change. Air is like oxygenated stuff going into your bronchial tree. Air and breath are not the same thing.
Okay, so when I'm being told this, you are blowing my mind right now.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I'm like unraveling so much training. This is great. So just so I understand correctly, when I'm breathing into my belly, when I'm belly breathing, and you did identify that I actually do breathe into my ribs, which I actually did some training around, which was great. We could talk about that in a minute and why. So that's like habitual at this point, it seems. But when I am expanding my belly, the oxygen is staying in my lungs, like the actual air. But what's happening is my body is just moving my belly.
Yes.
Like, how's that happening? So is it from pressure?
Okay. So this is a great question.
Yeah.
In order for our bodies to pull air in, so atmospheric pressure is pressing down on every square inch of your body, like 14 pounds of it on every inch.
It's amazing.
You're under pressure.
Love it.
Now, in order to not like implode, explode, die, you take a breath.
Yeah.
We have to balance out the pressure between inside our body and outside of our body, which is why when you go to space, you can't do that and you need machines to do that for you.
Okay.
So humans under gravity can equalize the air inside the body with the air outside the body, the pressure. The only way you can do that, though, is by changing shape somewhere in your body to pull the air in. Mm-hmm. So the lungs
do that.
The air go into the lungs and the lungs do that. When you pull air in, you create a system of low pressure.
Yep.
Okay? In order to create a system of low pressure, you have to create high volume somewhere else. So you have to over-volumize somewhere in your body. Like, how do planes fly? Pressure and volume.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pressure and volume. You cannot have a state of high volume. Like, it's going to be really hard to take a breath in your body if something doesn't open.
Yeah. I mean, when I was pregnant with Ruby, which this is my belly over here that you can see. In the trees. So when I was in the weeds, she's not over there. When I was pregnant with Ruby, my second, I got really sick, and I think we don't have a way of verifying this, but I think I broke a rib from coughing so much and so hard.
Yeah.
And then it hurt to breathe so badly, and I couldn't take a deep breath because there was no space for that
That's right.
volume.
You couldn't create volume in your ribs.
Because it hurt.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we do have to create, in order for like to help air come into the body, we do have to create volume somewhere.
Yeah.
So when you can create volume in your belly, you can create volume in your ribs.
Yeah.
When you create volume in your belly, you generally will leave if the ribs will do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They won't actually expand.
Yeah.
The belly will just it will increase in volume, which then will press the pelvic organs downward a lot, which is what people feel when I ask them to sit on their perineum. And usually in an actual setting, I would quiet them down. Like what I did with you in 20
that
seconds
was
is like
very quick.
it was a quickie.
I'm going to do
it was
more
a drive-by.
practicing. Like this is I'm having a rewiring right now, just live. This is great. Like,
Yeah.
And so I did this program called Birth Fit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know Birth Fit?
Maybe.
Okay. Anyway,
yeah.
One of the things that and I love Lindsay, the founder. She's like wonderful. I think you would love her too. So one of the things that I learned though was about breathing into my side ribs, into my back ribs, and as a way of restoration. So I want to know more about why creating that volume in our ribs as opposed to our belly. I mean, I do understand what you just said.
Like why is it better in the ribs?
Just location-wise, because it's
Yeah.
closer to the diaphragm. But is there anything else we should know?
Yeah, the ribs are capable. If you look at the architecture of the ribs versus the architecture of the belly actually can't expand. Like we say expand your belly, but the belly cannot expand. It doesn't have... Like you can expand your uterus with a baby and you can expand your bladder with water and you can expand like food, like your stomach with food, but your belly can't actually expand. It actually just kind of bulges when you do that. Okay. Whereas your rib cage, because of its architecture and its connection to the spine, so all these ribs are wrap around to the back. You've got this incredible architecture that as you inhale, your breath as if pushes against bone, like meets the bone resistance, and the bones then expand as well. So rib cage breathing, I call it 3D rib expansion, creates expansion in the ribs. You get a bit of spinal movement with that inhalation, like your spine will extend a little bit, your ribs will widen, your collarbones, like you get spreading through the whole bony system of the rib cage, which is phenomenal. And then as a result, you don't overpressurize the pelvic floor.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Because but when you breathe into your belly, you overpressurize your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that can really expand down. Like nothing can really expand here. You don't have the bony architecture capable of expansion.
The rib cage has this amazing, it's just, like you said,
designed for
architecture. It's like scaffolding.
Correct.
To protect our organs and
to expand. I mean, it's really,
it's literally made
the ribs, unlike scaffolding, which you don't want to be that movable, the ribs are really actually they're like these floating.
They're pliable.
Yeah, we think of our spine as rigid. Our spine is floating in water all the time. Like our spine and like our bones like are floating. Well, specifically the spine is like floating in liquid all the time. And the ribs are like, think about how many joints and how the ribs are made of so much cartilage. Why? Why is it cartilage and not hard movement? So the ribs are designed for all this movement and support. They support our heart and our lungs, but the ribs are a phenomenal conduit of movement in the body, and they offset load and shock. And
that's so cool. Okay, so we shift how we do what we do when we do it, and we start with the breath.
We start with how are we breathing?
Just blew my mind.
Yes.
Okay, great. So we start with how are we breathing? We just learned a really important piece there.
Yes.
And obviously that takes practice. That takes investment. Like all of this repatterning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we only have this one body, and the way we feel in our bodies impacts every single moment of every single day. So I can't think of a better investment.
It's not how we're wired to think, and you're completely right. Yeah. It is an incredible investment for longevity, for now, for everything. It makes you feel better about yourself. It's like, it's the best medicine. Being in your body is amazing medicine.
It is amazing medicine. So we look at the breath first.
Yeah.
Then where do you go?
Then we look at how is your core responding?
Okay.
And so for a lot of people, if you put your hand on your belly and imagine, this is a horrible imagery, but imagine somebody's about to kick you in the belly.
Yeah.
You're in a jujitsu class and it's warranted.
Yeah.
What would you do in your abdominals to prepare for that? You would most likely actually push them out.
Oh.
You would harden them and push them out. If somebody's about to punch you,
I would
you
do this. Yeah.
Unfortunately, which is that's a great strategy if somebody's about to kick you. But if you do that a lot, and again, if I had you like sit on your perineum, you would also feel that creates a lot of downward pressure.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's also about like when you're moving around your day and your life, is your core always inadvertently pushing outward? Ultimately, we want to like cue in to like, are you walking around bracing your core all day long? If you imagine this, Kate, don't do it, but imagine it. I mean, be my guest. If you were to lie on the floor, your listeners can do this. You lie on the floor and you lift both legs up. That's a pretty popular fitness move, right? Both legs come up off the floor. You're lying flat on your back. Put your hand on your belly. I have no doubt, like it will push outward. For sure. That is like a reality that you can't avoid. That pushing outward all the time is not advantageous to your core or pelvic floor. It's ultimately not the best pattern to live in.
And would that be caused by like a nervous system response of threat? Or like, why would we be walking around pushing out our abdominals all the time?
I don't think we move our bodies the way we're designed.
Okay.
Like I think we sit a lot.
Yeah.
Kids like start sitting when they're 5. And like, we just lose that deep intrinsic core response.
One thing at my kids' school, which I think you'll appreciate, is that in the classrooms, they have these, instead of chairs, they have these stools and the bottom of the stools aren't flat. And so the kids can just kind of be rotating and moving around at all times and their hips can move and they're never like fully still. And I think it's the best.
Yeah, agree. And so, a lot of our like intrinsic way of moving is lost by the time we're 5 or 6. Yeah. Shoes. Think about the shoes we put on kids when they're born. We basically destroy their foundation from day one by putting babies and children and adults into shoes. So shoes are a huge problem also. So like, why don't we have deep intrinsic responsive cores? Well, because like we put like the most important structure of our body in a cast from like year 1.
Right. And
then we sit our asses in a chair, year 6.
And then there it is.
And there we go.
So we're looking at breath and we're looking at core. And then what? Anything else next? I mean, there's literally like a lifetime like just in breath and core.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, does your pelvis move and do your hips move and are your hamstrings tight? And like, what's your pelvic positioning like? Yeah. And like, how's your stack? Is your pelvis stacked over under your, well, hopefully your pelvis is not over your ribs, but maybe are your ribs
just
stacked
upside down at all times?
So we're looking at a variety of things, but we try not to induce overwhelm. My goal is to get people to feel safe in their bodies and not like they're being nitpicked and under a microscope. And I think a lot of the fitness industry makes people feel broken. So the goal is really not to be like, and you walk around with your pelvis in the wrong position. No, we don't do that. It's get on the mat. Let's move through this. Let's explore. Let's be curious. And this is why if you are investing in it, you don't have to solve it today. Right. How about you give yourself some time?
Yeah.
Like you got time.
Because the patterns took time to get there.
Totally.
So shifting that.
And what do we know about the body and the brain? It loves a good challenge. Like nurture your brain and give it the challenge. Like you don't need to do this in a day. That's your ego that wants that.
So is all movement good movement?
Yes.
Yeah?
I feel that all movement is good movement. It's about whether you live in that movement all day long, right? So like the core, if somebody wants to do those V-ups, laying on the ground and their legs going up and their core busting out, be my guest. Please don't live in that shape.
Yeah. And maybe don't do those every day.
Yeah. And if you have a core and pelvic floor issue to begin with, how about you not do those right now?
Yeah. Okay. Another common problem, diastasis.
Yes.
Yeah. So where does that come from? What should folks know who have diastasis? And can you just describe it for those who might not know what it is?
Diastasis is a separation of this abdominal wall. So specifically the superficial wall separates from the midline. A lot of people don't realize when you look at somebody with a 6-pack, those muscles there are attached in the center to a thick connective tissue. That thick connective tissue can be injured. It can kind of thin out, be injured. And so then that's those 6-pack muscles, which were here, get here. If you look at a lot of bodybuilders, you'll actually start to notice a pretty big gap in their abdominal wall. Also CrossFitters. It's very common in bodybuilders and CrossFitters. I mean, not every bodybuilder.
Is that from strain?
Yeah, it's pressure.
From pressure.
Yeah,
right,
our
'cause
bodies
it would start
adapt. You're
to-
just pushing out all the time.
It's like a
you're
whole pressure
over
vessel.
pressurizing. Yeah, you're over pressurizing that tissue there, the linea alba tissue, and so
Okay.
the abdominal wall separates.
So it's a separation.
Yes.
And what are some of the issues that can cause?
So that's a really great question. It's very aesthetic. Like a
Okay.
lot of my work used to be a very diastasis, and I still love it and work with it and
Sure.
all of that. But it doesn't cause a lot of pain for most people.
That's good to know.
Back instability is the biggest one. Whereas pelvic floor dysfunction, it causes a lot of things across the board. And the abdominal stuff is very aesthetic for people, right?
Okay.
Like they don't like the way their abdominals stick out, protrude. And again, I work with a lot of bodybuilders who have this problem.
Wow.
And they come to me and they're like, my abdominals protrude and this is not okay. And I'm like, well, I can't help you as long as you're bodybuilding. So that's fine. Like, don't stop bodybuilding. Come to me later.
Okay.
Right. But like people want to resolve it. And if you start to look at the body of a lot of CrossFitters, you'll see that their abdominals are not these flat washboard
No, they're
abdominals.
not.
They actually kind of
stick out a little bit. I've noticed that. So is that diastasis?
Well, it's either diastasis or what we call like this oblique dominance, where their oblique muscles are so overpowering that, and from the side they squeeze everything in, so everything pushes
has to
forward.
push out because it has
And
to go somewhere.
I mean, physics.
Would you call that like overtraining, or is it just because it's like an aggressive use
it's hard
of
to
weights?
say. If you look at a baseball player, they'll end up with shoulder
Yeah, they
patterning. I mean,
do.
there is some collateral offsetting from the sports we choose to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So just is what it
ballerinas
is.
have adaptation.
Oh my gosh,
It's
their poor feet.
adaptation. They're poor hips.
Yeah. Okay. And gymnasts with the neck. I mean, there's just a
Yes.
lot going on.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just what happens.
Yeah,
in the
those
body.
were the two. Gymnastics and ballet were the two things. I don't tell my kids they can't do anything, but those were the two things that I was like, you will not be doing gymnastics or ballet.
I feel similarly.
Yeah, just 'cause the
Also,
work I'm in.
football and hockey, which wasn't really
Well, for
probably
sure.
likely with my girls, but you
Yes.
never know. If I lived in Maine, hockey may have been
Yes.
a possibility, and I was not really here for the head injuries.
I support you.
Great. Luckily, my girls seem to have taken to theater and pottery.
Yeah.
I feel
Oh,
like
nice.
so available to go to shows
Yeah.
and not games. I would support them in anything, but I'm thrilled.
Yes,
so far, we'll see.
for sure.
Okay, so when folks come to you and they come through your program, I know you do a teacher training, but also Restore Your Core for folks who are just like, I want to feel better in my body. I want to heal these patterns, whatever. What are some of the most common or exciting things that they experience as they make this investment, knowing that it takes time? But like, what are some of the, and I know that you probably don't love this, but like, what are some of the results that folks are experiencing?
No, I love results.
Okay,
I love
great.
results. I think the biggest result, well, different people would say, some people get really excited because they can get back to the activities they love.
Great.
Right. They can run with their kids. They can
Awesome.
get back to doing what they love, CrossFit, marathon running, like they feel empowered. I think the other thing that people love is they feel empowered. They finally feel like it's not like they went, it's like I took my dog to the vet the other day and she was itching and the doctor gave me a pill for her and I gave my dog the pill and I didn't ask questions, right? Like that is how most people are being treated in their bodies and they're not dogs.
That is a classic.
You've got a pain.
classic
You go
story.
to the doctor or you go to
You
the
get a pill.
PT. No offense to PTs, I love them.
Yeah.
But they give you some form of prescriptive exercise and it feels like you're taking a pill and nobody's fucking invested. And they don't actually take their pills because a pill is easier to take than lying down on the floor and lifting your legs 10 times. It's goddamn boring. So I try to make it super interesting, super exciting. Like I try to make the whole process very somatic and embodied.
Yeah, you do.
So that they feel very dropped in to their body and what their body is doing. And it's easier for them to then have an investment. And so I think that empowerment is the currency of our worth. And if I can give females and anyone coming to me more empowerment, that's pretty exciting to me because that's the currency of our worth. And when you feel more whole in your body, that's why do I teach people to wag their clitoris? Yeah, I think your clitoris is super cool, but it just helps you reclaim your body in a completely different way.
Yeah.
It makes more of you known to you.
Yes.
And I think what people love about me and my system is that I am so positive and I'm not shaming you. Like, I'm never shaming. I'm in wonder. You have bunions. Oh my God, beautiful. Like, those are just a pattern. Like, it's all a pattern to me, and it's all wonderful, and it's all tissue, and it's all adaptation, and it's all biology and physiology, and it's so interesting. As opposed to like sometimes what the fitness industry does is like, oh, you're broken, and we use words like disorder and all the disses. We just diss people. We literally just diss people every which way. I'm like empowerment all the way, and I think that's another reason people like it's smart and I'm smart and it's educational and I'm they like that. Yeah. It's smart. It's a smart system, but it's empowering.
Yes. And so beautiful.
And I don't mean to sound cocky, like I'm smart, but like
you are. That's why I like you.
I think that people appreciate intelligence around the body because I'm not trying to sell you get a flatter belly.
For the sophisticated consumer, I think that we get better results when we actually do understand the why.
Of course.
Behind it. I know that if somebody can give me all the data, I'm like gonna be on board with the practice way more than if they're just like, do this exercise, you'll get this result.
Right.
I want to know
you
why.
have a dysfunctional back, here's an exercise.
I want to know all the physiology and the mechanism. Okay.
And I think how I give them the physiology, though, is I bring it alive in layman's terms.
Right. Yeah. You're not like teaching an anatomy class. No, it's just the amount that you need to know to be inspired to make that investment to get the result.
Yeah.
I'm making a hard left as we land the plane here. And that is this. You have 3 daughters.
I do.
They are older than my kids. You have one going off to college, one who's 16,
and 14.
One who's 14. Okay, great. So I look to you as a guide, as like a mother who, seems to know what she's doing. And one of the things that you are unabashed about, really beautiful about, is sensuality, sexuality, our bodies. We've been talking about wagging our clitorises. I grew up with a mother like that, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Also.
So amazing.
Yep. So grateful. And I've got these girls, right? And so I want to know, how are you, like, what are some of the key lessons that you would pass along to me and anyone else listening who wants to provide an empowering environment for our children around their bodies? And I'm going to specifically ask it around sexuality and sensuality as they get older. Like, what have you modeled for your kids? What have you explicitly shared with them that you would just say, like, absolutely, I stand by this. This has been a win. I would recommend doing it this way, knowing that every family is different and, yada, yada.
I'll start with a story. I was in the kitchen the other day with my husband, and my husband was cooking dinner, and my daughter was getting ready for like a pajama party. She's 17, and all of her friends were over, and one of her best friends walks into the room, and my husband's right there, and she's like, Lauren, do you think my nipples... Now she starts talking in front of my husband. Now, I don't bat an eye. He doesn't bat an eye. She sees him. She doesn't bat an eye. And we have a whole conversation about like, how should she position the bra if she doesn't want the nipples, but she wants the sexiness, but she wants to look like cute, all of this.
Amazing.
And I just thought, holly fucking Luya. Like my job here is done. And then the next night, me and a bunch of the girls were talking about prom sex. And I was making pancakes for my daughter, my 14-year-old, who had a sleepover, like a ton of boys slept over, and I wasn't wearing a bra. And I looked at my daughter and I was like, do you mind? White t-shirt, no bra. She was like, Mom, you do you. I think that so seeing how my kids embrace me is huge, but my problem is that I have no filter. I don't know how to be proper because I think proper creates disempowered females. And I think proper creates like more sex abuse.
Yes,
like
it does.
I am not okay. So I'm not okay with that, but I don't think I'm improper. I'm normalizing. I just normalize the body. To me, so when my kids were little, it was never like, let's clean your woo-wah. It was a vagina. You have a vulva, and that's a vagina. And like, I never substituted names. Right. They came with me every time I went to the bathroom, whether a tampon was going in or coming out. So they've seen me. My daughters talk about their periods in front of males all day long. Well, I've never said to them, shh, we don't talk like that in front of men or strangers. No.
God forbid, because that's where men also came from.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to keep this a secret. And it's not dirty. Your period's not gross. It's
actually full of stem cells, which are very healing and regenerative.
Listen, People rub it all over their bodies. I know that.
We talked about it with Sarah earlier.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
Yeah,
but
no,
maybe.
I'm not either. But
Someday.
yes, maybe. Although I might be losing my period in the next few years
Well,
too.
see, now's your time.
Yes.
Now's your time for the menstrual blood facials. Get it while it's good.
I might go for the plasma instead. But okay.
Great. I've done that. I've done the
PRP,
the vampire facial. Yeah.
So,
It's
you know,
weird.
I think it's just about like really normalizing the body always, always, and not being ashamed. And when my daughters do come to me and they're like, Mom, I'm worried that they can see my boobs, I don't shame them for that, being like, show your goddamn boobs. No, I don't do that either.
Right.
You want it, my kids having a mother like me are naturally a bit more modest. To be honest, if you don't want
kind
your
of
kids
amazing.
to be sex maniacs, you should be a sex maniac, because let me tell you what they'll become. They will go
rebellious.
bell against you and they will close their legs for life. No,
my
the truth
God.
is, and so like
That's
when
really
they
funny.
come to me and they're kind of like, no, I don't want to have prom sex, Mom, stop trying. Like, I'm like, okay, fine. You know, I always told my daughter if she wants me to buy her a vibrator. I asked her best friend, I was like, should I buy her a vibrator and leave it on her bed? She was like, no, don't do that. So I was like, okay, I won't. My daughter knows, you want a vibrator? I'm here for you. You like, I'm here for all of it. And so when my kids tell me, like, they are safe with me and their friends are safe with me, and like it's a very safe home, and the safety extends to them wanting to be how they want to be.
Yeah.
You want to be modest, be my guest. You want to be, I don't like slut shame their outfits. Girls these days, they like to show it all.
Yeah.
Go for
we
it,
also
baby.
live in Miami, so it's like culturally what's happening.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah.
so much. You have a real like tone of neutrality, actually. And you're not being sensationalist in any way with the way you are. It's just very like, it's kind of neutral.
I feel
And
very
so
neutral
it's
about it.
powerful because you're not trying
Yeah.
to get anybody to be any kind of way.
Yeah.
You're just supportive and celebratory of the way they are, as long as they're feeling safe and empowered. So that's what I'm taking away.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to raise like really empowered girls. Like, we spend so much time trying to get them to be modest. Like, that is the worst thing you can do for a female. And studies are showing that there is way less like teen pregnancy and teen abuse for teenage females who are receiving really good sex ed.
For sure.
In my next life, I want to be a sex ed teacher for like underserved
You
youth.
would be brilliant. We had a neighbor who was a
public health.
guidance counselor at a school that was like an underserved community in Maine. And Penelope used to roam around our neighborhood in Maine starting at the age of 3 because it was like a very safe neighborhood. And so my girlfriend texted me and she was like, Penelope's at my kitchen counter having a snack. And I was like, fantastic. She was my across the street neighbor. And later she says, so when Penelope came over for a snack, she was sitting at the kitchen counter and she all of a sudden says, oh, ouch, my vulva hurts. And my neighbor was like, I just need to tell you, and I want to celebrate that as a mother, giving her that kind of information and empowerment to use the correct language about her parts in any scenario is going to dramatically decrease her risk of sexual assault. Because that's what the data shows, is giving people the right names for their parts.
Yes.
And I was like, that's amazing.
Yes, it's
and also it's just a funny story.
It's incredible, but it is incredible. And that is, I don't think like the majority of mothers would have a story like that. Because unfortunately, we try to raise girls to be like, you know, what we perceive is like proper and modest.
And I'm so glad also that my neighbor was celebratory of that moment, because then we send our kids out into the world and who knows what other people are. But the best we can do is what we can give them at home. Lauren, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This has been great. I'm so glad I got to. No one else will know what the other conversation was. It was amazing also, but this one was like also so delicious. I learned so much. I'm going to be breathing in my ribs. That was great. That was like a total takeaway. Okay, where should people go to find you and your amazing work?
Well, Restore Your Core is my brand, but my Instagram is the Lauren Ohayon.
And it's great. Like, watch the Instagram. It's very valuable information.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, at the Lauren Ohayon.
Yes.
And restoreyourcore.com.
And restoreyourcore.com.
Okay, those will all be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.